Hi guys, welcome back to the Bike Cave. Today we are going to discuss about the options we have to instantly increase the braking power of our hydraulic rim brakes. I wanted to make this video for a while now, but I was working on a couple of products that are relevant to the topic of this video, and thus today we are going to discuss about some bike hacks that you may already know, and also about some other ones that you may haven't seen before. So be sure to stay up to the end of this video, and I promise you that you are going to have stronger and snappier brakes after this one. Before we start, I have to stress out that I've already released some other videos that discuss about the maintenance tricks and tips to improve the performance of the hydraulic system of your brakes, and also I've discussed about the comparison between the use of mineral oil versus the use of alternative water-based brake fluids. So today's video won't discuss about such topics, but it is to focus on the actual braking action and actually discuss about the tricks you can do in order to increase the friction between the brake pads and the braking surface of your rim. However, if you haven't watched the previous videos and you want to check them out, you can find the relevant links in the description below. To begin with, we are going to discuss about the brake pads, as there aren't really too many tricks that you can do on them. The first thing that you have to check out is the alignment of your brake pads, especially if you use the more traditional slave cylinder clamps that have the integrated bolt joint to make the brake pads parallel to the rim side. If you want to make sure that your brakes are parallel and equi-spaced from the rim surface, you can use a spacer such as this one I designed and made for that purpose, or any other thin material stock you can find around. If you're going to get a set of these, you can find them already 3D printed and for sale at the bikecave.eu, or you can visit the Xi Cycling website to directly download the printable 3D file and print them for yourself. The second thing that you can do is to make sure that the braking surface of the brake pads is clean and no dirt has been adhered to it. To do that, you have to check your brake pads regularly, and if needed, you can rub them on cordicide paper to resurface them and clean any debris that may have been accumulated on their surface. However, if you proceed that way, you have to make sure that you keep your brake pads parallel to the sandpaper, otherwise you will have to reorient them so as to make them again parallel to the braking surface of the rims. Other than these two tricks, there isn't anything that you can do on your brake pads other than selecting a really good set of brake pads. I personally prefer brake pads with aluminum backings, as they are way stiffer and they provide a more responsive feel at the lever whenever the brakes engage. Also, as you may already know, I've developed my own brake pads and I may be biased, but they are my preferred choice after trying some of the best commercially available brake pads. If you haven't checked out my last video that takes you through the development journey of the Xi Cycling brake pads, you can find the link in the description below, and you can get a set or two of these brake pads by visiting bikecave.eu. Having discussed about the brake pads, it's time to analyze the tricks you can do to increase the friction of the rim's braking surface. The most common trick that every trials rider does to the rim of the surface is to grind both sides of the rim with a grinding disc. I've noticed that each rider has a personal preference on the aggressiveness and technique of the grinding process so as to achieve the desired grinding depth and pattern. The only tip that should be mentioned regarding the grinding of your rims is that you should select a constant direction during the process and not alternate between clockwise and counterclockwise grinding around the rim's periphery. Also, I personally try to keep roughly the same angle between the grinding wheel and my rim. Moreover, I try to be quite consistent regarding the strokes I perform on each area along the rim's periphery, and to do so, I keep track of the valve hole position while I go around the rim to avoid going through the same area twice, as this could potentially affect both the stability of the wheel and the ease of truing. The next tip is not actually a trick, but it's something that you might haven't thought and could potentially keep your brakes running smoother and more consistently for longer. So I have noticed that every time we engage our brakes and for any reason they do not stop immediately, there is a bit of rubbing between the pad and the rim, and hence this lovely braking sound that we all know and expect from our rim brakes. However, this rubbing action may result to a bit of material removal from the brake pads, and so some of the particles that are generated during the braking action may stick to the braking surface of the rim. The next time that this brake is to be engaged at the same area of the rim, some of these particles will be still there and act like tiny rolling elements that may worsen the effectiveness and the performance of your brakes. So once I noticed this one, I started bringing a painting brush to my training sessions, and every time I have a non-optimal landing and my brakes fail because the pads rub onto the rim, I keep it in my mind to brush a bit the braking surface of the rim during the next hydration break I take and before I continue my training session. I've noticed that by doing this, my brakes have a more consistent performance during my training sessions, and also the grinding of the rims lasts for longer as these tiny brake pad particles tend to embed to the ground surface of the rims. The last two tricks are quite similar to each other, but they are probably the best option you may have to instantly improve your braking performance, as it changes completely the friction characteristics between the brake pads and the rim. The first one is to rub a bit of rosin on the braking surface of your rims. Rosin is traditionally used to increase the friction between the bow and the strings of violins and other similar musical instruments, and it's made out of rosin with the addition of other materials to make it a bit less brittle and supposedly to change the sound characteristics of each instrument. If you visit a music store, you can find a plethora of different rosins to select from. However, over the past 8 months, I've developed my own rosin recipe and have extensively tested with XC-cycling brake pads. The rosin I've developed is made out of organic and locally sourced pine rosin and beeswax, and I really prefer it over the ones that are designed for violins and other similar instruments, as I've balanced the stickiness of the brakes and the brittleness of the rosin block. This means that I have achieved a stickiness level that lasts without having to reapply rosin to the rims as often as I did when I was using rosin blocks that were made for musical instruments, and also it's not as brittle as the other rosins are, and it lasts way longer than others used to last. At that point I have to mention that I've also seen other riders use tar as an alternative to rosin, but I personally prefer the last one as it's a material of natural origins and it doesn't contaminate both the surface of the brake pads and the rims. My last trick to make your brakes stronger is also related to rosin, but it's different and I bet you haven't seen it before. So a couple of years ago I had this crazy idea of having a liquid alternative to rosin, and I really feel a bit of guilt that I haven't shared this one with you earlier. Thus I experimented with dissolving rosin to isopropyl alcohol and applied it to my rims, and I was really impressed with the difference in braking performance. Also, I noticed that applying rosin that way, it can soak into the ground surface of the rims and it can last a lot longer. To do so, I've used a marker to make it easier to apply it and also store the liquid and carry it around. The only downside of this one is that you have to apply it a bit earlier and before you ride, as it may take a while for the solution to fully evaporate. Actually, I use it so as to prep a wheel after a fresh grind, and I tend to apply a bit of fresh liquefied rosin an hour or so before I train. However, keep in mind that I also keep a rosin block with me at all times, so as to be covered every time I need a bit of fresh instant braking action during a training session. If you're going to try this liquid rosin solution, you can get a marker and a set of rosin candies at the bikehacks.eu. Keep in mind that one rosin candy is enough for a marker full of isopropyl alcohol, and make sure that once you apply it, you have to wait until it fully evaporates. Otherwise, you may experience a bit of stickiness between the brake pads and the rim, and this is not a pleasurable feeling. Also, you may need to apply multiple coatings of the solution on each rim, but this is up to you, as you may have to experiment with the level of stickiness that you want to achieve. Moreover, if you overdo it and you want to make your rim normal again, you can wash the coating off with isopropyl alcohol, or if you are training, you can rub a bit of dirt on the rim as a temporary solution before you go back to your bike cave and properly clean it with isopropyl alcohol. These were the tricks I do to make sure that my brakes are as instantaneous and as responsive as possible. I hope you liked this video and you found it helpful. Nevertheless, do you have any other tricks that you do and you want to share them with us? Also, which one of these tricks do you already use, and are you willing to try any other one that you don't use up to now? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, you will find any of the products I already mentioned at my e-commerce website, and purchasing from the bikehacks.eu, you directly support the channel and keep me extra motivated to experiment and design new products and tools for our bikes. If you have any questions about any of these tricks and tips, I would be more than happy to discuss it in the comment section below, and you can also follow my accounts on social media and check out what I'm up to months before I release the final videos on the channel. Thank you so much for subscribing and watching, and until next time, have fun riding your bikes and make sure that your brakes are as strong and as snappy as possible. Bye!